Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today is Chris Rossini, our co-host. Chris, welcome to the program.
It's great to be with you, Dr. Paul. And for those out there that are wondering about Daniel McAdams, he will be back on Monday.
Very good. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people glad to see him, but they're going to miss you too, Chris. We've been. Yeah. I get only good reports about you, so maybe it's time for me to take a vacation, and you and Daniel can have this. But anyway, I would be at a loss if I couldn't come and visit. But it's great that we have an audience that's very interested. They know you well now, and they certainly know Daniel well. And we do this without a tremendous amount of money, but we have a tremendous amount of energy. And some days we can be very, very positive and find the good things that happen. Like yesterday, I thought it was very positive. Today's not going to be so good because if we're constantly seeking truth, sometimes there's a pop-up and there is a bit of truth come out and you say, hey, we're going in the right direction. But other times, and unfortunately the majority of the times, we're hearing too many things that are very negative. I want to visit today, Chris, with an article that appeared yesterday in Zero Hedge, and I thought it was a fantastic article because it was reviewing an article written by Glenn Greenwald. And this has to do with, we've hinted at this and we have mentioned it, and we knew that something was going on ACLU where we have found them to be allies over the many years, over the decades really. And we saw them that they weren't libertarians, but they were civil libertarians, and they were progressive Democrats, and they were pretty good on it. But all of a sudden, something has happened just very, very recently, and this is what Greenwald has written about, because there was the ACLU wrote an article, an op-ed piece in the New York Times, belligerently defending their position. And I want to start off with a quote from them because it sort of tells you the whole concern here and what's going on here. Because, and this is one that sort of got to Glenn as well. Because they've been challenged by some people saying, hey, aren't you guys libertarian anymore? Don't you believe in free speech? And so in this op-ed, this is a quote. They were defending themselves and their civil libertarian beliefs. We care deeply about civil liberties and civil rights for all, which is precisely why we support vaccine mandates. And they write this down seriously. And of course, Glenn said that this is Orwellian, and that's being kind. It's crazy enough stuff, but it really demonstrates what's going on, in the whole world today. How they take it and endorse things, how they're justifying, these mandates, and ultimately, I think the theme of what he has, and we're going to have a couple other mentions of the movement, that what is alive and well and why they're becoming more aggressive and getting this American Civil Liberties on their side is, I think they are obsessed and determined that they will have a vaccine passport. And more and more regulations coming, and they always couch in the words that say, oh yes, but the federal government doesn't have any authority to make you do things or make you wear a mask. But they have power and clout and influence, and that's why they are able to control the business people. The business people go along and they become the policemen, and they enforce all these rules and regulations and restraints on lockdown. And it's an effort that I think that unfortunately the people are going to suffer from. Our local paper today said, well, one of our major school districts close by said, put the mask back on again. This variant is very, very deadly. And they don't have any science or facts to back this up. So I find this article very important. People should read it if they can get hold of this. But Chris, I'm sure if you've looked at this article.
It's stunning, Dr. Paul. The ACLU said, far from compromising them, vaccine mandates actually further civil liberties. So it's not even neutral. This is a plus. This is a bonus for your civil liberties. Of course, it's absolutely ridiculous forcing injections into anybody's body is not only a violation of civil liberties, it's criminal. You know, we're talking about the basics of law. Just as no one is allowed to invade your house, it's called a home invasion without your consent, so it is that no one can inject something into your body that is an invasion of your body if you do not agree to it. You know, and the job of government is to protect from home invasion, from bodily invasion. They're supposed to punish people that do these things. You know, and the ACLU says, no, this is not absolute. It absolutely is absolute. Your body belongs to you. You do not rent it. You can rent your house from someone else that owns it. You don't rent your body. Your body is yours and yours alone your entire life. You know, and we teach this to babies, the principles of liberty. Once they're able to understand, don't take that. That belongs to someone else. Don't hit him. You can't do that. That's an invasion of their body. So the ACLU is absolutely, completely wrong here.
Very good. That's exactly the problem that we're facing. Saki was asked about this movement in this direction because the president's going to speak later today on this subject, and we can't expect anything beneficial. And she said that they're planning some rules and regulations that will deal with this issue, but they're going to direct it at the unvaccinated. So it's not a principle at all. It's how to punish the unvaccinated, to coerce people to do what they're told, and that is get the vaccination, no matter how ineffective it is. And Glenn, you know, of course, spends a lot of time on that and what the history is all about. But this whole idea that the real enemy is the unvaccinated is something that is going to be very difficult for them to achieve, because I think hopefully it's going to awaken a lot more people. And there's hints already about, well, you know, the medications, you know, could be helpful to them, and the monoclonal antibodies are very helpful, but they're talking about, you know, one doctor senses the fact that he's in this business and he's using it all the time. He thinks that, you know, rationing has already come. So can you imagine the power if they're looking for more vaccinations, that all of a sudden Florida sure has had a lot of trouble because they are really open to using these antibodies, and it's keeping people out of the hospital and the whole works. But now they're going to use rationing, and the businessman will go along with it. They'll be the enforcers, and it will never be the government. But no, I think of government, if you're worried, if it's difficult for you to blame the government, just say Fauci, and then you understand what's going on.
Yes, Dr. Paul, and you know, we read earlier this morning that supposedly Biden is going to sign an executive order where all federal employees and contractors will have to be vaccinated, and there's going to be basically no opt-outs. There's no way out of it. So basically, working for the government or with the government is now going to carry a very steep price tag. You must allow this invasion of your body, again, if you don't want it, in order to have this job or to work with the government. Now, from a perspective of liberty, we desire smaller government. There should not be millions and millions and millions of people that work for the government. There shouldn't be cronyism. We rail against it all the time about people who make their money on government overreach, but you don't shrink it like this. This is terrible. You don't threaten people, you know, with needles and put them in this type of position to make this type of decision. You know, we may not like their jobs, but we stand for the sanctity of the individual first. So no one should be threatening anybody that works for the government or contractors, whatever. No one deserves this type of treatment.
Right, and you know, and Glenn in his article spends a lot of time talking about a previous article by the ACLU, and that was back when it had a much better reputation. But he's dealing with this, and I think he knows there's something seriously wrong, but I don't think he can fully explain how this comes about and where the pressures are and why they capitulate and why they roll over like this. But he cites in detail an article the ACLU wrote in 2008, and he quoted it extensively. And actually, it's a great article. It should be published today. That should be their position. But they were saying almost everything that we have said, about the danger of vaccine passports and everything that's going on and the vaccinations and the control. They mentioned that it's sort of like a plan for NSA surveillance of all American people. And this is I think, a serious problem, and I think it's very important that we call attention to this. And of course, Greenwald is excellent on this. But he also pointed out, after this very decent long article that he wrote, he said it was sort of like a PS, and he said. And that was 2008, where he found this fantastic article, which had a really very, very decent and correct position. That there was an epidemic, the Ebola epidemic. No, it was the Ebola epidemic, and in 2015, as recent as then, they had a much better position. But it has changed, and even last year. They came out, and all of a sudden they wrote a very good article that said, the way this is moving in the direction of passports and registrations and all this surveillance, that it could become a racial issue. They took a position that they should be cautious because the minorities may be punished more than the others. And that's just real recent. So something very dramatic happen within months now that has happened, and all of a sudden they don't exist anymore. The American Civil Liberties Union, they have no credibility left, and that's why we will continue to look, because there are a few left. And Glenn Greenwald is certainly leading the charge on defending libertarian ideas on personal matters. Civil liberties is his expertise. So I think that this article hopefully will wake up some people, but the big question is exactly why did they shift gears, and why did they do this? Why did they become overwhelmed, with this wokeism and all the things they have to do, and this whole idea that you can't know what truth is. They say, oh well, we don't even know what it means, to have civil liberties. It becomes very, very vague. And but there are people in the cultural Marxist movement that actually believe that there is no ability to define truth. So if you live with that and say that is proper, and you have to accept it, and now politics become Marxist oriented. If you can't know the truth, you can't know right or wrong, you can't know the things that Chris mentioned. We teach our kids. If you can't know that, if there's no objective way of defining right and wrong and truth, you end up with this. So it almost looks like there was much what the American Civil Liberties Unions was doing. Recognize that you could recognize that there is some truth that people did deserve in a natural way, by a higher law, that people have their own lives to run, and there shouldn't be a government to do what they can do and regulate them and tell the people exactly what they can put into their bodies or what they can't put in their body. So I think it's the loss of this ability and the admission that you can't know truth because there's no basis to it, and it explains a lot of what's been going on in lockdown and cultural Marxism, and that has to eventually be addressed, or it'll be very difficult to win this fight.
Very good, Dr. Paul. I will conclude by, this is my opinion. The FDA approval, which was supposed to get all the hesitant people, has failed to move the needle, from my view, on vaccinations. People did not run out and get it, even though it was FDA approved. And, again, this is my view. Perhaps it wasn't hesitancy all along, but conviction that people do not want it. Everyone that wanted the shot, you had plenty of time to go get it. It's available for anybody that wants it. And that should be the end of it. Everyone who doesn't want it should be left alone. That should be it. But it's not the end of it. They keep pushing further, trying to corner people to get these shots. And, in this situation, we're all now placed in a position of what is too far for you. I met a very nice lady at our conference over the weekend, and I believe she was a nurse, and she said flat out, I quit. She said, I'm not going to be forced. I don't care about the job. And obviously, when she was speaking to me, it was an easy decision for her. But this is not an easy decision for many people. It's anguishing. People are writing to us. They don't know what to do. They do not want this thing, but they're being threatened with their job. So I wish I had an answer, because we're all in different places in this world, and there isn't one answer. But I will end, Dr. Paul, with a quote that I have gone to that has helped me throughout my life. It's from a man we all know named Thomas Jefferson, and I'm going to read it, and hopefully it'll help the people that are watching. He said, quote, "If ever you find yourself environed with difficulties and perplexing circumstances out of which you're at a loss how to extricate yourself, do what is right and be assured that that will extricate you best out of the worst situations. Though you cannot see when you take one step what will be the next, yet follow truth, justice, and plain dealing, and never fear they're leading you out of the labyrinth in the easiest manner possible. The knot which you thought a Gordian one will untie itself before you." That's great advice. It's not easy to follow. We all have to muster the strength to do what is right.
Very, very good advice, and that fits into my belief that it's available to us what we should do, what is right and wrong. People can figure it out. And I think it's available to us to understand what the proper position should be on civil liberties and the right of the individual. And it's available to us now like never before about, free market economics. For instance, Adam Smith was great in introducing us to, free markets in general, but he had a position on pricing that was completely wrong. He believed in the labor theory of value, and that's what the communists have been for it. So, but now today there's a better understanding on economics and personal liberties, and yet that might be why people are switching around, because their little empires are threatened if the people are waking up, and I think that's why they have to visit. What if the unvaccinated people happen to represent the people who have been on the right track? Well, that'll make them look badly, and it's going to interrupt their power struggle, so they're going to have to attack the unvaccinated and blame them for the problems, and I think that is what is happening. One thing that Glenn pointed out that I thought was interesting, he says that what's happened here is that the people have become the enemy. With all this mess going on, the disease is not the enemy anymore. But we all of a sudden had a disease and problems and management and doing things they shouldn't be doing, and then we had destruction of conventional medical care, and so the disease is avoided and we don't really deal with it in a proper way, but the enemy is the people. It's the unvaccinated people. Those are the people who are causing all this trouble. That's why we have to attack them, and that we have to get them a vaccine, which means that you can't go anywhere or do anything or get a job unless you have been vaccinated. It will become, and has already started to become, a passport to just acting and doing normal things on a daily basis. The war, he also made the point that the war on terror, has and will last a generation. It's been going on for a while, ever since 9/11, and yet before 9/11, we didn't talk about war on terrorism. But the war on terrorism, it's a tactic, but it's really turned out to be a war on American people and our civil liberties. And that's why the first thing that they did, they already had it printed up after 9/11, was the Patriot Act, and it got passed. And just think, even the airports have never gone back to normal again. But the point he's making here is that can last a good while. But if you declare the enemy are the people, when you're dealing with a disease. Diseases have been with us for thousands of years, and we do know a lot about diseases. We know about natural immunity. We know a lot more about nutrition, but that becomes taboo, and you can lose your job because you happen to believe in some natural remedy. And if you believe in ivermectin, you might be ridiculed. And they might be the people who do the ridiculing because somebody used ivermectin are the ones that are making fools of themselves because the drug's been around a long time and the government's approved it, and they're in political business. They're not in trying to figure out what is the best way to care for the people and how to protect our liberties in the meanwhile. So I think this is an issue that is vital. We have talked about it a lot. We will continue to talk about it. I don't expect any good news from the president today, and I've always been cautious. You know, if there's a statement I see, you know what, this Biden guy, he's a bad news guy, and he created all this inflation. Well, he's a problem, and he's part of it. But he didn't cause all this. He didn't print up the money for the past 20 years. So I always want to be careful to be how to handle that. But right now, I'm beginning to be a lot more annoyed with this president and what he's doing here on the civil liberties. We ought to wake up and make sure that the people understand it. In the meantime, we have to learn how, in a peaceful manner, in a non-confrontational manner, resist this nonsense that's going on and insist on seeking the truth, and don't accept the whole idea that we have to reject the whole idea that you can know what truth is. Yes, I think it's a job to find out what truth is, but to say that it's impossible to know the truth and become a nihilist about it, which is the direction that we're going in, that's very dangerous. But I am satisfied that people are shifting. They're coming our way. We were energized at our conference last week, and I think that the people out there are waking up. At the same time, we're seeing the crowds get bigger and bigger resisting. We're seeing people putting more and more masks on. But that's their resistance because they're terrified that truth may win out in the end, and that, of course, is the side that we're on. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.